Good evening, and welcome to Hawaii Theater Center. I'm Dave Moss, joining you here live with Iggy Jang and a very special guest this evening. Iggy?
We do have a very special guest. This is Dr. Maya Hoover, who is a professor of music, teaching voice, you're a mezzo-soprano, at the University of Hawaii. And she's here because she's one of the soloists in the Beethoven Symphony No. 9. So we're excited to have you here and to talk about not just the piece, but everything in general, Dave.
Absolutely. It's great to have a singer with us. You are tuning up with Iggy and Dave, our weekly program here as we await the start of our 2021 season with the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. And as people are settling in here, maybe grabbing a second or third glass of wine after this afternoon's announcement. And really, we invite you to join in the conversation with us here. And you can do that by texting the number at the bottom of your screen, 808-528-0506. Please text us your questions. We're happy to answer them as we go throughout the evening here. Ask us about Beethoven. Ask us about singing in the time of COVID, perhaps. Tell us what you're going to be doing these next 14 days. And we just look forward to hearing from you and connecting with you tonight. So welcome, and welcome, Maya. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm thrilled to hear about Beethoven. I just enjoy, nothing against the orchestral musicians, but having a vocalist in the room. So
well, thank you. I'm happy to represent.
Yeah, great. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm new here. I know everyone out there probably knows you already, but
well, I've been here since 2007, and as Iggy said, I'm on the faculty at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and we're getting ready for an unprecedentedly exciting online adventure, but everybody is on board and game and ready to go, and I'm also a professional singer.
Great. Well, welcome. We're so glad to have you here. Now, we could jump right into the program, but I think we all need to just break the ice a little bit, relax, and you know, it's been a heavy news day for us here, kind of as we get ready to launch our season. Maybe a little bit of another setback, but we're still planning to move forward with some really exciting programming with the orchestra here digitally, live from the stage here at Hawaii Theater Center in September, October, November, and December, as we sort of chart this course as to the new normal that we're all living with here with COVID-19. So stay safe, stay healthy. We all have to do our part, mask up, all of those important things. So, Iggy, what has been keeping you busy as we're still locked down?
Well, like you said, you know, today's been sort of a, you know, not such a happy day, and we all have to dig in deep and find something that is inspiring. And for me, you know, just anything music related, but I teach. I'm lucky to, like Maya, to teach every day. And so we're back into a lockdown, I guess. I remember the first time we had the lockdown a couple months ago, just logging into my computer and teaching online and seeing the kids' face and having them smile at you back, and you could be really hard on them, but they were very appreciative, and that was very uplifting. Maya, you're also a teacher, obviously, and how have you spent the last few months?
Well, we've been on vacation from the university, so I've been doing some cooking and some New York Times crossword puzzles. Yeah. So, and I completed a couple of Sunday puzzles, which for anyone who does the puzzles can maybe appreciate that. And I did a nice happy dance when
it's a fine balance between keeping up with your skills, your musical skills,
for sure,
but finding other outlets. I'm lucky to have in-laws who have a house and a yard, a garden, and I've been weeding out some bad things. Maybe I weeded out things I wasn't supposed to, but that's kept me busy. But Dave, I think you haven't had much time to relax.
Well, you know, I've tried to keep the balance. It's been an interesting grind as we sort of figure out how to emerge from this, and so it's been long days. But I really enjoy the work. I enjoy the opportunity to serve the community and to work with the musicians and really kind of chart this path, as we say, back. And you know, I think about, you know, what we were just talking before we came on the air, the impact that the arts have on this community, and, you know, tossing around numbers like $2.5 billion, that number that we keep coming back to, that the arts really impact this economy. And it's exciting for me to think about a community that is more reliant upon arts and culture and live performance, and how we get back to that as a reliant piece of our economy going forward here. And we can't do that by ourselves. We need the support of all you. And there's going to be some things rolling out this week through the Hawaii Theater Center and through the city and through all of our partners here that really is going to show this need that we have to keep the arts alive, to keep it thriving, and to keep your eye out for some things that are red, that are illuminated red throughout the week. And that'll really be this message that we're trying to get across, that we need support from our community, our elected officials across Hawaii here, but also federally as well. So thank you for your continued support and all you do for us at the Hawaii Symphony and the Hawaii Theater Center here. So outside of work, I've been running a lot, though, Iggy. I'm not sure I'm running from anything, but it really just helps me balance. I listen to a lot of audiobooks while I'm doing that. It just, it's that equilibrium. And
it's very important for your stress level, I think.
What stress?
But this is a very, very, I feel like, I've been saying every week I've been here, I feel very privileged to be here at the Hawaii Theater Center and just to share great company and good wine. And you mentioned how the arts is so essential. You know, we talk about the first responders and kudos to them. I think I mentioned it before. One time I was visiting a hospital a few months ago, and there were first responders, nurses, and doctors, and there was a string quartet made of doctors and nurses, and they were performing for patients, and that showed us, everyone, how important music was to them. You're a singer, and obviously there's always a label on singers, but during this COVID time, there's another label. How is it coping, you know, being a singer, and maybe people have been a little bit afraid? I don't know. How is it going through that?
Well, you know, I have a lot of friends that are unemployed, and a lot of world-class artists that can't even put food on the table. But what I'm seeing is that we're all sort of trying to keep music alive and keep each other supported. And so everyone is doing their best and creating new works and sharing in the way that they can, and trying to just rally each other, right, and support each other. And remember, this is as much a part of who we are as what we do. And I think that's what makes it so hard for us as artists, right? It's a job, but it's also part of our identity for a lot of us. So we're just trying to, I think, keep that part of ourselves alive by supporting each other and by being present. And, you know, for me, I'm watching all of these things online that my friends are posting and thinking, look at this world-class artists right here in my living room, you know? And it's a wonderful feeling to be able to do that.
You're not alone, that's for sure. You share the stage with the Oahu Choral Society for the Beethoven 9th performance. Joanne Falletta was, of course, conducting. It was her first time last season to come to town. And you also had 3 soloists sharing the stage with you. Can you tell us about them? Because I didn't know, but you actually knew them from a while ago.
Yes, the baritone I had just met, wonderful, wonderful artist, wonderful singer. The tenor, Ta'upupua, of course I know, and Marcia Thompson, the soprano, we sang together a long time ago. We've known each other a long time, and it just makes it so much more meaningful to have people that you just admire and adore as humans around you. And, you know, for me, I mean, it's an incredible piece to be in the middle of, right? It's like the musical equivalent of sitting in the middle of a storm or storm chasing, right? So it's just so much going on. And every time I do the piece, I hear something new. But to have that, I don't know, those good vibes around you, it's so amazing. And of course, to have my, you know, what I affectionately call my favorite band behind me, my favorite orchestra to sing with, it's the same thing. Because, of course, I have great admiration and respect for every orchestra that I sing with, but these are people in my life, you know, and there's this really special meaning to that. Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
And was this your first Beethoven performance? Your first Beethoven 9?
This was not my first.
Okay.
This was my fourth with the Hawaii Symphony.
Oh, wow.
And I've sung it with a few other orchestras. And once I was supposed to go sing it in Peru, in South America, except that it changed, I think, to a Mozart Requiem. But the irony would have been most miles traveled for fewest notes sung, I think, for that. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Beethoven's Symphony Number 9, it's got to be probably one of the most recorded symphonies. You know, it's become such this iconic piece, and it's one of those that everyone knows. What is it about Beethoven's symphony that is so, as a singer, what makes it different? There's not many orchestral works, symphonic works where there's a vocalist at any part. Mahler, of course, is one that comes to mind. But how does that change? What is that?
Well, this was one of the first pieces of classical music that I knew, and that was because my father loved the melody. And he rescued this old, I think it had been a player piano, and the player mechanism had been taken out of it. And that's where I learned to play the piano. But he always used to say, oh, you know, play that Beethoven tune that I like. You know, so here I am, just a few years later, and I get to be in the center of what Beethoven really created.
Yeah.
You know, and so for me, not only is it a glorious piece of music, but it represents so much of the way that music came into my life. Just the role that even that little, I think he got it for $200 and it was white and he stripped it and refinished it. But that terrible upright piano, you know, the significance that had in my life and the way that affected me and who I've become and what I've done. So, I mean, I can only say that it's just it's a powerful piece. That and the other thing is that one of the first recordings of this that I knew was at the falling of the wall, where they changed Freude to Freiheit, freedom.
Yeah.
And so I think the profundity of that and Schiller's poem, it's overwhelming for me, right? And then you add all of the colors of the orchestra, and my own role in it is it's not irrelevant, but it's such a teeny tiny little fraction of that.
But that moment when the solo is singing, is sort of a catharsis.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's in the fourth movement, and you have the first movement, which is sort of a setup, and it feels like there's nothingness. It's like the beginning of time, and nothing's been created. And you have, I think, in terms of music description, it's like an interval of fifth of tremolo, bom bom, and so it's sort of it doesn't feel like a filler. It's a sound that doesn't have much substance. It's a very clean sound, and that's why it feels like it's the beginning of the world. And then there's a tension going, and then there's a furious scherzo. There's a very lyrical third movement, but also always this sort of motive of either fifth or fourth. You know, the scherzo is bum 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 bum, or even the beginning of the third movement. Da 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 da. Those are fourth intervals, and so the beginning of the fourth movement is a short summary of all those first three movements. So you need to live through this whole setup in order to feel that deliverance when who is it at first who sings? The tenor sings, or the baritone?
The baritone sings
and,
first, yeah.
And what is he saying? He sings something like...
calls all of his friends to attention, right? He charges the atmosphere or the universe.
From that point on, there's no more of this cacophony, right?
Yeah.
And then everyone in the audience goes, right? And that's why it's so important, excuse me, to live through it all. And if you can't just cut to the chase,
right? Because
it won't be as rewarding.
Well, in the start of that last movement, I had a sneak peek, a sneak listen to the recording that we're going to hear tonight on Ep.4, and our cello section just rocks it. I mean, it is the band really. The band was really together that night. It was really phenomenal. So, bravo to our colleagues in the orchestra, and you'll get to hear that just in about 14 minutes here as we tune over to Ep.4 for tonight's broadcast. So. Iggy, we gotta talk about this little Beethoven thing that I like to talk about. There's this big controversy around tempos in Beethoven. This was at the time when the metronome was being invented, and Beethoven wrote in many of his parts tempo markings, so the speed at which Beethoven thought the piece should be played. Now we have to remember that Beethoven was deaf at the time, and possibly a bit crazy as well from the stories we hear. And so it's been this interesting thing that's really come to light in recent years as to how you can play Beethoven's symphonies at Beethoven's tempi. So they're very fast. They're light speed, you could say. And so what's your take? I mean, you've done the violin sonatas, all of these things. What's your thought?
So the reason why Dave brought this subject is because you're an encyclopedia when it comes to period playing, because that's what was your position before coming to here.
A real interest in classical instruments, that violins that were made exactly as they would have been in Beethoven's time in the early 1800s, using gut strings, and there was less tension on them, and there were different shaped bows, and so you were able to play music stylistically different. But where this really comes to light in the Beethoven symphonies is that at Beethoven's tempi, can you actually sing all of the, can you get all of everything in there? And it's the same on violin, all the articulations that Beethoven writes.
I'll tell you how crazy the tempi are, because I was practicing Symphony No. 4, last movement, and in my edition, it set a tempo, which was very fast. But then my teacher says, no, this edition is wrong. It shouldn't be that tempo. It's actually twice as fast, which made it impossible.
Yeah.
So I think your argument was that the construction of the bows made it easy to play faster. Now, I don't know, when I die, one of my wishes is to go back in time and hear Paganini play the violin, go back in time and hear Mozart and Beethoven. That would be one of my wishes. But I'll tell you another story too. Is much more recent. Is one of my teachers studied with Joseph Szigeti, who played with Béla Bartok. And apparently, Béla Bartok, early 20th century from Hungary, would set his tempo marking. He had a sort of a pendulum, and he would just swing the pendulum. And then he would say, okay, quarter equals 76. So, sometimes you can maybe question the composer.
It's funny you bring up Bartok, because in his viola concerto, there are what appears to be tempo markings, but at the time Bartok was ill. And it actually appears that he was marking his temperature at the time, not the tempi at which to play the concerto. So we find all these things in manuscripts, and it goes to one of the conversations we had last week, I believe, where we talked about the circumstance under which pieces were originally written. And as we find ourselves in a time when singers, vocalists, have to be 12 feet away when they're singing. And sort of what does that look like for opera? How do you stage an opera where you're 12 feet apart? How do you have a choir of 150 sing the last movement of Beethoven, and certainly testing would help, and a vaccine, but all those things. But that aside, how can we continue to communicate? What does that look like? How are we creative in a way that we're still able to do something that's so important to us as a society, as a people?
Well, there are a couple pieces to that. I mean, I think that in Europe, they're already there.
They are.
Right? A friend of mine who's a wonderful singer in Italy has already posted a couple of things, and there is a lot of space, a lot of extra empty space, but you just have to use all of your energy to pull it together and make it seem like that space is full.
Yeah.
Right? And I think if singers have a gift, that's it. Right, is to fill space with energy and with sound. And we're seeing that with choirs. And even throughout the U.S., as people are able, it differs, right, from university to university, city to city. But people are experimenting because this is important enough. And it's not that people want to risk their lives, but a lot of people feel that their soul is at stake if they don't try. So we're seeing a lot of people experimenting with the outdoors, with being creative with spaces. So I think it's a charge to artistry, right? Yeah. You can't rely on tricks and props and things. You really have to use the art and the energy.
Absolutely.
Can I just ask a silly question? So if you're a pop singer, you sing one way, but if you're classically trained, it feels like your voice comes not just from your throat, but from your lungs and from your guts. Well, in terms of pure technique, how is it different to be a classical trained singer? Where does the voice, the sound come from? Or as opposed to maybe someone who's singing a pop song?
Well, the very short version is that it comes from resonance. So we have to use acoustics to create sound, essentially. And what we're doing, I compare it a lot to driving a stick shift, right? A very delicate balance of muscles. We're athletes at the same time. We're artists. And you have to take all of that power, because you can't just push, because it won't.
You can't scream at the top of your lungs.
You can't, contrary to popular belief, it's not just screaming or yelling most of the time. But, at least we try to differentiate a little bit. But it's a fine balance of things. And the short answer is resonance, because we need to be able to fill a theater like the one you see behind me with no amplification. Right. Whereas a pop singer, even in musical theater, there is amplification, right? There's a microphone, there's a sound system. But someplace like Blaisdell even, right, where there's 2,000 seats in the hall. So not only do you need to fill it with big sound, you need to fill it with quiet sound. And if you're singing piano and it needs to fill an entire theater, that has to be a really resonant sound, right? So it's physics of sound. And that's what separates them, essentially.
Great question.
Now,
That's a great question.
I was also wondering, you've performed Butterfly, like you said, as a soprano, but also Suzuki in Butterfly. Are there, we think of singers and it's really like, character singing, you have to immerse yourself in the character. Yeah. How different is it to be singing an opera as opposed to a staged concert?
Well, in an opera, you have a prescribed character. You have an interpretation of that character, but you have a drama, you have a reference, you have a story, you have an overall arc. When you have something like a poem, so that's art song or that's Schiller, it's a little bit up to you, right? We use the word subtext a lot. We have a text that has a literal meaning and a poetic meaning, but then we also have a subtext, right? So, right, joy, what does the word joy mean? Well, there's a million different ways I can sing the word joy. I have to use the colors of the vowels, the way that I say the consonants. I always say the way that I taste it. It tastes different, right? And so we really have to give it a narrative, and we have to give it a significance and an inherent meaning in a way that, we have a little bit more help with opera. There is of course, that element in opera as well. But you have one character for 3 hours. And although that character might go through changes, that's very different than trying to capture something in 3 minutes or in 23 minutes, right? Because what you're trying to give to the audience in that moment is a universal knowledge of that poem.
Well, Dave, sounds like us instrumentalists could learn a few things from singers about subtext.
We could, yeah, absolutely. We have a few questions that I'd like to get to here. Really appreciate those who have sent those in. First of all, Maya rocks. That's straight from here. You have a fan.
Thank you.
Another question is just a little bit of what you talked about with the Berlin Wall, and if you could talk a little bit more about the instance of that piece being performed. And a little bit more context for that.
Sure. Well, you know, I was young-ish when that happened, and I don't know that I fully understood it at the time, but I understood how it made me feel. That one word changes. I remember my father telling me they changed that word.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I really understood it in the way that I would now, but I will equate it to this. When I was 16, we had the Estonian Men and Boys Choir come visit us. I grew up in Maryland, and we did a joint concert with them. And it was the first time in my life that I understood politics, because they were forbidden from flying their flag. At that time, they were part of the USSR. They were not allowed to sing their anthem. There were so many things that they couldn't do, and that all of the sudden, as this, you know, middle America teenager, that all of the sudden became personal to me. And I understood it on a level because of the music. And we did a concert with them. And apparently there's a large Estonian population in the Baltimore, D.C. area where I grew up. And at the end of the concert, this little old woman stood up and started singing the Estonian national anthem. And we were weeping because we understood the significance of that. And I think that, you know, art and music art has always played a role in politics and society and in culture. And we can't always define it. You know, maybe at 16, I probably couldn't speak to it as clearly as I can right now. But I felt it, you know, and I felt that in that recording, and I maybe couldn't identify it, but I understood it.
Certainly.
And I think that's always been the musician in me, the artist in me, that I might not be able, I maybe couldn't put words to it, but I understood it on a visceral level. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you. That's really, I can't follow that up with anything. Support the orchestra, support live music.
That's right.
No, I really appreciate that. And, you know, we're going to be, those moments are in our future here again. And I think that that's so important to remember with what we're all going through, that this is temporary, and it's not the worst thing that's ever going to happen to us, perhaps, and that this music feeds our souls. It feeds, it keeps us going, and yeah. We are getting close to the time when we're going to all tune our radio over to Ep.4. And so before we go, I just want to say a few thank yous. First to Maya for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it, and look forward to hearing you sing very soon at 12 feet away. But also to our Masterwork sponsors, the Halakulani, for all of your support. We are truly grateful. To the Hawaii Theater Center and Greg Dunn, to all the support of Donner Tsunoda at Video Productions 808 for your support in making this possible. To Iggy, to all of our supporters, to our friends at Hound and Quail, who I saw post this afternoon. They're shutting down for 2 weeks. Go out and support your local businesses these next 2 weeks. We've got to support our community throughout all of this, and we're going to get through this, and it's going to take a little bit of time, but we're in this together. And Iggy, we're getting close to turning it over to Ep.4. Do you want to take us there?
Yes. Not only can you catch on Ep.4, but also stream the performance via the Ep.4 app or at hawaiipublicradio.org.
Thanks so much. And thank you again for joining us. Thanks for all your support. And we will see you here next week at 7:30 p.m.